Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Kelly Looney with AWS, and along with our great partner, New Relic, I'd like to welcome you to our webinar with Climate Corporation, our customer, on achieving optimal modern application performance with DevOps at scale. If you know anything about AWS, you know that we like to speak through our customers. And so this webinar is about giving you an example of using our partners' technology along with AWS to achieve great results. We'll start off with some introductions, and then talk a little bit about AWS's perspective on DevOps, and then an introduction to New Relic, and then get right into our case study with Climate Corporation, and then finish up with some Q&A, and then finally with some next steps. First of all, just to give you an idea of the people on the call, my name is Kelly Looney. I am the SI practice lead for DevOps. I work in our partner organization and work with our different partners that work in the kind of DevOps arena, both our consulting partners and great ISVs like New Relic. I've been in the software development world for over 30 years and have been in the DevOps world since DevOps got started. Eric, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Kelly. Hi, everybody. I'm Eric Mittelhammer. I'm a solution consultant with New Relic, and that means that I get to work hand in hand with our customers to help them discover the best ways to use our product to achieve their goals, whether that's through monitoring or process improvement, or in this case, migration to DevOps. Prior to joining New Relic, I was actually a customer myself, but as a practitioner, engineering manager, architect, working with some pretty cutting edge DevOps technology. So I'm excited to share some of that knowledge and about New Relic and what we're doing with you folks today.
We also have Scott Pidgeon from Climate Corporation. Scott.
Good morning, I'm Scott. I'm at Climate Corporation. I'm a senior staff engineer. My role is to build monitoring and logging tools at Climate to enable observability to our services. I don't have as much experience as Kelly does in the software industry, although I've been around for a little bit. I was at Microsoft for quite a long time, including working on the Azure team, the OS team. Since then, I've bounced around to a couple of small companies, specializing in infrastructure and AWS, as well as in DevOps tooling.
Okay, so just a little bit of perspective. I think everyone on the webinar kind of is familiar with who AWS is, but let's talk a little bit about kind of how we look at modern applications and how we look at DevOps. I think at this point we kind of there's fairly wide agreement on what good looks like. We know what modern applications are. We're headed towards independently scalable microservice type architectures, typically either things based on containers or based on serverless types of systems. We're looking for things that connect through independent APIs. We're looking for systems that are able to deliver updates continuously. The whole point of these microservice architectures are systems that are able to constantly and consistently change rapidly. We want systems that can scale globally, so they're able to seamlessly scale. They're fault tolerant, and they're able to carefully manage scale and persistence. And they need to have security built in. So these are all the things that we need in modern systems. The problem is that most of us aren't there, and it's a lot of work to get there. And so that's what a lot of our effort in the IT world is all about nowadays. And this is what a lot of the work in the kind of DevOps world is all about. And one of the things that we talk about a lot is cloud and DevOps really going together. You know, it's certainly possible to do a DevOps style development without cloud, but the thing I'm finding nowadays is that it's almost always the case that the two are happening together. And frankly, the majority of the DevOps work that's going on is happening in the context of AWS, and there's a good reason for that. And the reason for it is that it's so much simpler and so much easier. You're able to get started fast. You've got an enormous kind of a jump start on the work you've got to do because AWS offers thousands of fully managed services. You know, I think the way to look at a cloud nowadays is that it's this enormous list of things you don't have to do. These fully managed services that are available to you, and it's not just the things that AWS has to offer, it's the things that our partners have to offer as well. Companies like New Relic, many others as well. And all these fully managed services are built for scale. They're all programmable. They're automatable. They have security built in, and we've got a model in place where you don't have to pay everything up front. Typically, you pay as you use, you pay as you go. And then there's a kind of the part of the organization that I'm in, which is our partner community. Virtually every IT vendor in the industry is making sure that their tools work well with AWS, and no one does that better nowadays than New Relic. New Relic is fully integrated with AWS. Their SaaS offerings are built on AWS, and so you know it's extremely safe to be able to work with any kind of IT vendor in the industry and work with AWS nowadays. So, you know, I mentioned, you know, containers or serverless. You know, the idea of serverless is to just forego this whole idea of dealing with exotic infrastructure in a lot of ways and just let that be generated for you by your cloud vendor. I think that's an answer that a lot of organizations are going to go to. You know, why deal with the infrastructure if you can just have it generated for you? So this is a direction a lot of people are going. And the other thing that I want to talk about is just sort of what's happening with operations going forward. How do we need to think about operations? Because I think there's a real fundamental shift coming there, and we just want to mention a couple of things there. And one of the first things I want to mention is that this whole idea of having an organization in your company whose job it is to run software that they don't really understand, I don't think that's going to be a thing in the future. I think that running software without understanding that software, that's just not going to be something that's going to happen. I think that infrastructure is going to be invisible, still elastic and optimized, but operations is going to change and morph into an organization that's about understanding what it's running and making it better. Now, does that mean every operations organization is going to be nothing but software engineers? I don't think that's the case, but I think there's an element of operations that's going to be about understanding software and making it better. And what that means is that monitoring, logging, observability tools, that's going to be where operations is going to live and work. And so tools like New Relic are going to become core to what operations is in a lot of ways. It's going to be way, way more important than they've been in the past. And so watching running software and looking for ways to make it better, that's going to be what your best technical people are going to be doing. You know, this whole idea of an architect imagining a system that doesn't exist today but may exist in the future, I think it's going to be much more likely that your best technical people are going to be watching existing software and thinking about ways to make it better. And so the things that we think of as SRE activities, that's going to be operations job one. And that's regardless of whether or not you actually have a role called SRE. Interestingly enough, we at Amazon, we don't actually have SREs, but we do everything that SREs do. We do them within our development teams. We don't want to have a silo which is called the SRE role. We want to do all those activities within our DevOps teams. The whole point being, we want to change reacting to software problems into being proactive about fixing, or not about fixing, about making software better so we don't have the software problems at all. And so one of the best ways you can do that is to use tools like New Relic. And so I'd really like to have Eric talk to you about that now. Eric, over to you.
Thank you, Kelly. So I'm going to get started here by telling you a little bit about who we are and what we do for those of you that are not familiar with New Relic. So we were founded in 2008 and we went public in 2014. Over that time, we've become a industry leader in the application performance monitoring and observability space. We serve over 17,000 customers worldwide, and as you can see from the logos beneath, that they span from large enterprises in every vertical to startups and everything in between. 50% of the Fortune 100 use us to help them deliver the software to their customers. And one thing we'd like to highlight, the fact that we were SaaS first and the only SaaS first observability platform allows us to have immense scale. We process over 2 billion events per minute for our customers, and that should give that gives them the confidence that we can, as we say, scale to their biggest day without having to think about the capacity of their monitoring for when they want to concentrate on their internal capacity. So one of the reasons that New Relic is able to help customers on their DevOps journey is that we've been through it ourselves, and we then offer that expertise not only in a prescriptive engagement manner with our customers, but our product is built around those learnings that we've had internally. We started out as a Ruby monolith with siloed teams by their technical discipline, so not by their functional discipline. So front end, middle tier, and API folks, operations folks, all separate. Communication breakdown, which led to very infrequent, expensive, unreliable releases. And that kind of led us to a point where we had to do some self-reflection and understand, okay, how can we improve on this process? And that was right around the time of the DevOps revolution. And we moved into a phase, believe it or not, where we were using New Relic to build New Relic where we hadn't before. And that lens, it goes back to what Kelly was just saying previously about being proactive rather than reactive. So as before, where we always used our own tools to understand system health and respond to incidents, we were now in a phase where each team was able to focus on measuring what they need to understand, how their systems are performing now, and how the changes they make are going to affect what they deliver down the road. And we find ourselves in a spot now where we have over 300 microservices, more than 50 engineering teams with embedded SREs. So SREs are members of functional teams. So they're embedded with that product unit. They understand how the product works and they understand how to apply those principles in respect to that product. And we do over 70 deploys a day and process 15 million messages internally per second. So one of the learnings that we took from all this, from that experience, is that moving to DevOps requires a cultural shift. And sure, there's a lot of organizational and process-oriented changes that you can make, but most importantly is the shift of how you're going to approach what you expect of your teams and what you expect to deliver to your customers. And part of that is because as you make teams smaller and more functionally focused, that will increase the complexity of your infrastructure and your applications. For example, moving to microservices, well, that gives every individual team the ability to deliver at the velocity that they want. It's going to focus them closer on just what they're working on. And that starts to break down the possibility that you can have a mental model of everything that's going on. There's just no way that knowledge is going to live in any one single place, and you've got to rely on your tooling to do that. And that really means that measurement is the foundation of all of that. You've got to measure everything and understand how every change impacts your product, your software, your business, and everything that it touches. And the way we try to expose that to our customers is understanding that data needs to be easy, accessible, and democratizable, meaning that no matter who's looking at it, they can get the data in the context they want that makes the most sense to them without defining first their access to it. So understanding that what mattered to an operations person 5 years ago and a developer 5 years ago has probably been combined in a way that we haven't anticipated. So we need to elevate that all together in a way that makes sense to the folks that are using the data. And with that, we've recently launched New RelicOne, which is the world's first entity-based observability platform. And like I said, what that means is that all Anything that can send us data is considered a first-class entity on the same level as each other. So a browser is no different from a Lambda function, is no different from a database, is no different from a container, is no different from a service application itself. And that data lives in a place that can be used by whomever needs to use it to get the information they need when they want it, which is really the backbone of what observability is. And just as an example here, this shows how, we encourage our customers to understand that all those data from all those different data sources need to live together to give them the full picture of what they're doing, what they're understanding. In this case, we're looking at, standard telemetry data such as, performance data like runtime metrics, team data like deploy status, MTTR, how long it's taking you to respond to issues, and then a customer-faced focused goal like an SLA. And putting them all together really helps you get the big picture of how your team is performing and how your application is performing, and thus how your business is performing. And that really comes together to understand how New Relic is paving the way to observability. So we look at that, this is the 3 waves of software monitoring. So traditionally, software monitoring started out focused on on-premises systems. So not only measuring on-premises systems, but installing your monitoring tool as an on-premises system. And then we came along, being the first cloud SaaS-based APM solution. So we kind of led the space there to get better metrics out of your application, where beforehand things were based on hosts and servers and CPU. Now we've expanded out to take that and also have specific APM data. And now we're moving to the age of observability. So understanding the complexity of systems and the different tools that fall under different ownership and focus disciplines by application, and bringing that all together into one place to allow anybody in the organization to get the visibility they need. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott, who is a New Relic customer with the Climate Corporation, who's going to actually tell you how he's done this in practice in the field.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm Scott. I work at the Climate Corporation. So Climate is a digital agriculture company, pardon me. And we have a climate field of application that we provide to our customers who are primarily farmers. Our goal is to enable growers to make data-driven decisions by collecting, storing, and visualizing critical field data. This enables growers to measure the impact of their agronomic decisions on crop performance. Okay, so what does this, whoops, let me go back 1 slide. What does this really mean? Primarily, we provide services that enable farmers to maximize their yield. The business case is this: as a species, we're making more people to populate this planet, but we are not making more dirt. So we have to think about how to improve the yields of farmers so we can feed a population. What I really enjoy about this space is that our customers, the farmers, are really 3 different people in one. I see them as entrepreneurs, biologists, and engineers. As an entrepreneur, the farmer every year has a new market opportunity to take advantage of. And so every season at planting, they're taking a market risk. They're biologists. They have to know about the climate, the soil, the topology, the seeds, the insects, the weeds, etc., to make good decisions to how to bring their crop into market. And they're also engineers. None of these folks maintain their own expensive equipment. They change oil, they change hydraulics, but they also collect data to make data-driven decisions to bring the product to market. So at the end of the day, Company Field View enables farmers to collect and store data, enable visualizations so they can make those data-driven decisions. So on the previous slide, and I'm trying to go back, we had a picture of our application in the iPad. The iPad actually goes with the farmer into their combine or into their tractor so they can actually drive on the farm as they're planting, as they're applying side dressing, as they're harvesting, and it maps them in real time. We have a satellite image overlaid with their specific farm data. In one part of the application, you can see which is the soil report. So when the farmer registers their application with Climate, what we see is their soil composition analysis, which is a web service call to a municipal database. So the farmer actually knows what the biome is within their farm. And then when they go to plant the seed, we can track what seeds they're planting in parts of their farm. And with this information, we can actually help them calculate their harvest. And when they go through harvest, we can record their harvest so they know what their yield is for the season. So where did Climate come from and how do we get here? So we were born in the cloud. We released Climate Field View in 2015. We started in AWS, and we are all microservices. So the good news there, we don't have this lift and shift challenge that maybe other folks have. The business has grown dramatically year over year. Our favorite analogy is we have this hockey stick approach where it was somewhat slow in the beginning, but then as we've gained momentum and we're going dramatically as we expand into markets. We are a global company. We have 4 different development offices, but more importantly, our customers are around the world. We have customers in North America, which includes Canada and the US. We are in South America. We are in the European Union, and we've just released an application for the Indian market called Farmize. We have roughly 180 services, give or take because we are retiring legacy services, consolidating functionality, and putting those into new services. We're going to the API economy. Farmers are our primary customers. We do have partners that do use our data models to extract information, such as farm crop insurance. One of the challenges we've had in the past is that developers had the flexibility when we were a lot smaller to pick their own tools using different languages. Back in the startup days, that was certainly was necessary. We had to have superheroes to get the business off the ground. However, as we try to standardize and make all of our 180 services more manageable, that became a real barrier to scalability. Now, one of the challenges we have is how do we monitor all our services at scale? I have the privilege of knowing some farmers through my family and really get to know a great part of our business. And I would suggest that one of the commonalities for farmers is that these guys are kind of no nonsense. Either it works or it doesn't work. Now we're going to give you a second chance. So as part of our business, I believe we have to be ready the first time. We have to always be available so that when they're out planting or when they're harvesting, we have that connection and they can get the real-time agronomic data. In order to do this, we have to have scalable, functional observability at all times. So we've already been at AWS, which is great. What we're using for monitoring before, we had a real challenge when I first joined, which is we had 2 tools effectively compete for one another. We had New Relic in-house. We also had an open source tool, which wasn't really monitoring. More of a time series database, which has its uses. However, I would suggest not so much a monitoring tool. So the first thing I did was to effectively determine what our requirements are for monitoring and then observability and how do we get there. The great thing was that we had New Relic already up and running. We had some people who were familiar with the tool. We had a great account team. I did do my due diligence. Went out, took a look at the Gartner Magic Quadrant, compared the tools, made a decision. For Climate's needs, New Relic is the best value in the market for the tool that provides. We take a look at our open source solution that we were using. While true that open source is free, I think there's a hidden cost. The hidden cost is that the developers have to be experts in that area. They have to know how to use these tools. That was great during startup time when people were the jack of all trades, very, very technical folks who were broad with regards to scale and scope. But as the business has matured, we're asking our developers to be more focused, to be more specialists in their area, and to really step back from being a jack of all trades. You know, we're building data models for farmers to use so they can understand what their yield report is. And that really means that we don't want these developers to be experts in monitoring. By using New Relic, by going all in with New Relic and getting rid of our open source tools, we rely on New Relic to be the experts in monitoring observability. I bring my requirements from Climate to New Relic to say, hey, here's what I want to do, guys. And they come back to me saying, well, this is what you can do. Here's this feature, here's this functionality. Please go forward, give it a shot, and let us know how it works. So right now, we are growing our New Relic implementation. We're maturing our New Relic implementation. We've had some successes. We've had some things we'd rather do better. But the great news is the team is all in. The team is excited about using New Relic, and we're moving forward. More importantly, this is a partnership with New Relic. I've got very tight relationships with my account team, with my solution architects, with my solution engineers. So when we hit the occasional bump in the road, they're more willing to jump in. By allowing our developers to focus on features, by providing training to our developers, say this is what the tool set is, this is New Relic. Here's how you use features like service mapping. Here's how you use distributed tracing. Here's the triage process we have at Climate. I can give back to developers more time because they're aware of the tools. We've trained them on the tools, and they can resolve any customer issues that pop up. Whoops. So at the end of the day, have we been successful? I would suggest yes. We have 180 services in production. They are all instrumented by default. This is because we have a process where the New Relic infrastructure agent and the APM agent are baked into our tools. Every time a new service is launched, those tools register that new service. It's automatically instrumented. It's popped into our dashboards. We like New Relic because out of the box, we believe it's a lot easier to use. This goes back to the cost of ownership, back to training developers on how to use open source tools. I believe that all the visualizations are very intuitive, very easy to follow, and my developer community agrees. We have a range of services that New Relic enables us to monitor, from some EC2, which we're moving off of in favor of ECS. We are all containerized, to RDS, to Lambda, to SQS, to EMR. It spans a lot of the AWS surface area. We're able to monitor all these applications and all these infrastructure resources all within New Relic to get real-time data. So Climate has changed the past couple of years. We've gone from a small startup serving our grower customers into a larger corporation with just 180 production services across 4 continents, across AWS regions, across a New Relic account. A large part of this success is due to our involvement with New Relic, and we look forward to continuing the partnership. Thank you.
Okay. So we come to the kind of the area now where we're going to go through a little bit of Q&A. I think I had one question that came in over the line. We have a few questions that have come in that I wanted to talk about. By the way, Scott, that was an awesome story, definitely. And when we want to follow up with a few questions that are here, I had one here for Eric that came in over, which is, as these systems, they start to get kind of complex, lots of different microservices and everything that are there. Do you have any way of managing kind of large numbers of these? Let's say you have over 300 microservices. Do you have any sort of a catalog or anything along those lines, a tool that you use to help manage the microservices that are there?
Yes, in fact we do. So we have really two pieces of functionality in our product that help folks understand their systems and the way they work together. One would be our service maps and dependency mapping. So that's built into the workflow of our New RelicOne interface. When you're looking at a particular application or host, you can look at a visual mapping of how those services are interconnected and how the hosts beneath them are interconnected, as well as a list of dependencies that go beyond just services that will show you any databases, any cloud services that we detect that are used by that service that you're looking at. And then, of course, we have our distributed tracing feature, which will then record from beginning to end individual instances of tracing through service to service, from beginning to end, and all the links between them, as well as all of the method calls and spans that happen within each service. So that will give you an end-to-end view of an individual experience or transaction that happened that a user incurred, as well as the aggregate view that I said before, being the service maps and dependency tree.
Awesome. So, Scott, give us an idea of the number of services that Climate is keeping track of, and kind of what your in general, I think you talked about it a little bit already, but how you're monitoring, how you're keeping up with and monitoring what's there. But give us an idea of the scale of the number of services that you're dealing with.
So across all of our environments, which is more than just production, we're looking at over 500 individual services. Now, you can take production and QA1, they're mirrored, but we do have other environments that are specifically for, say, the data scientists.
Got it.
So the first step is really to standardize, is to ensure that every time an application is launched, that it's instrumented. And so we do this by baking in the infrastructure agent, New Relic infrastructure agent, into the container. We bake in the New Relic APM agent into the image itself, so that when the developer launches their service with our tool set, boom, it's already instrumented. We are moving forward into automating our processes even more. We are looking to move to using the APIs to allow for infrastructure as code to enable further instrumentation of the services. So one of the challenges we had initially was that we had to educate the developers on how to use the UI to configure the services with things such as appdex_t, which is cool that New Relic provides us a default value for that particular instrumentation. However, that may not be completely appropriate. So in the past, we've had to say, developer, click here, click there, and update your appdex_t. Your appdex_t, pardon me. What we're doing now is going to roll out a feature just actually within the next month, which is to enable a developer to set their appdex_t in the service manifest file, which is a core configuration file for services for us, so that we can call the appropriate New Relic API to set those instrumentation values at deployment time. So we're really going for maybe in our DevOps 2.1, which is towards infrastructure as code, to enable instrumentation for all the services at scale.
Got it. Awesome. So, Eric, another question for you. If I've already got, fairly advanced logging and analytics, why do I need an APM tool like a New Relic?
Yeah, great question. So, if you have, say, a logging tool, which is great and which is a key part of observability and part of the reason that we just recently added logging capability to our product line, that's very good at understanding what has happened in the past, and also to collect what you may want to look at that you weren't anticipating. So understanding log messages that come from the libraries that you use that you may not have control over, because that is the standard output format for embedded libraries and things like that. But to really understand what's happening in your application, you need APM. You need to understand within your code how individual method calls are performing, how grouping performance by, say, external calls to different services, how those are performing. And then also to give you the ability to annotate that data with things that mean something to your business. So that all of the New Relic APM agents have a feature that allows you to add custom attributes, which is adding key value pairs to the metric that we're collecting on your behalf, meaning the performance data. You can then add things about how many, I don't know, the value of all the items that are being added to your cart, or whatever is specific to your business, that you can then bring into your observability platform and understanding how performance is affecting your actual business.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you. So back over to you, Scott. Just give me a summary of kind of what do you think were the keys to your success? What were the core things that made things work out for you, kind of in summary?
Great question. From the highest level, I think the first piece is to have a champion within the organization who is willing to get their hands dirty with a problem set and then drive for the solution. It just so happens it was me for climate. So you have to have one person who's aware of the technology, who's aware of the business problems, and able to go through the individual teams, get executive sponsorship, get developer sponsorship to drive the tool set forward. This includes also getting business requirements, and then selecting the right vendor is probably number two. I got awful lucky that we had the right vendor from the choice, which is New Relic. but then from there to build a deeper connection with that account team. So New Relic is a large and complex tool. There's a lot of great features, but coming into the sponsorship piece, there's no way that one person can know it all from the get-go. So partnering with your account team to say, here's what the business problem is, here's our culture at the company, and here's where we want to go, and then let New Relic come in and say, well, gosh, maybe you should think about this, or have you heard about this feature over here, and work with the solution architects to help draft a plan that both the New Relic as well as your company can go move forward with. And then by bringing the Relic experts into the engineering team, in my case, the infrastructure team, to build a plan for what New Relic is going to do and help us with in guidance, in technical resources, in training as well, and then let my team go ahead and implement a lot of the more complex pieces, such as your infrastructure as code. So it's sponsorship and it's partnership with New Relic to move forward.
Got it. Awesome. One more question about this whole kind of, this is for you, Eric, around this whole kind of observability. You know, observability is all the rage out there. And kind of, in general, you talk about observability versus monitoring. I kind of look at it as monitoring is looking for something that you know how to, that you know ahead of time to look for. Whereas observability is about asking a new question. And so the question that I have is, what's the best way to ask? You know, my sort of issue is that observable kind of means queryable. Okay, yep. I need to be able to ask new questions. And my question is, what's the best way to ask? Is it through SQL? Is it to ask everybody to be a database person, or is it something else? What's the best way for us to ask these systems new questions?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I think you summed it up really nicely in your explanation of the difference between the two. One anecdote I like to use, and not to open up a can of worms here, but if any of you folks out there are software developers, comparing monitoring and observability is a lot like when people ask about the difference between concurrency and parallelism, right? They're they're related to each other, but they answer different questions. Meaning, like Kelly said, monitoring is taking measurements of things that you know about or that you have to monitor, say, CPU or throughput or, your error rates or your transaction times. And then observability is really the measurement of how well you're able to answer those questions. And what you really have to do is, first of all, as a subset to reach observability, you have to monitor everything. So you have to have your monitoring in place first. So that is measuring all the things you can and using a tool like New Relic APM and infrastructure to just get all those measurements coming in everywhere you can, as well as adding your business metrics to those things like I discussed before. So now you're putting those in the context of how your business is performing. And then you need a way to put those all in context. And I mean, New Relic has what we call NERCL, New Relic Query Language, that allows you to slice, dice, aggregate, and chart data from across everything that we collect, whether that's something we collect automatically or data that you send us, to put all those things in context. A good example that I always advise people, especially when going on DevOps teams, is making part of a process to make, say, a release dashboard. So anytime that you're working on a particular feature as a developer, you need to make a dashboard that shows you all the key things that are related to the piece of software you're about to change. So that includes the bare metrics like the transaction times, the error rates on that particular route that you're changing, as well as the number of database queries you're doing, as well as the performance of those queries, as well as the business metrics. So how many people, if you're changing your password authentication module, how many people are successfully logging in? You need a tool like New Relic that's going to give you the ability to put all those things in one place and give that team or that person the ability to see them all in the same context.
Got it. Let's see here. I'm kind of looking through some of our other questions here. One more, just from a standpoint of kind of understanding how to, managing kind of DevOps teams, and let's go to Scott first. What, a little bit about kind of what are the metrics that what are the metrics that you're collecting from your teams? What are the key things that you're trying to collect and look at as you're going forward?
It really depends upon the surface area of the service that the service spans. So for example, we have a collection of services that ingest satellite information, collect photos, processes that information per grower, per farmer, is that push that information to the individual customer, to the farmer itself. And so we do this processing during off hours for our growers. And so we really have to be cognizant from an infrastructure perspective as to, the response time from our S3 bucket, everything from these images going to S3 bucket. And then once we have that information, we have an alert that says, well, for some reason, I'm not throwing stones. If S3 is a little slower than we would like, we throw an alert and have the developer go take a look and make sure everything is okay. Once we have the image in local S3 and put it through our processing pipeline, we need to ensure that the resource itself is operating optimally so we can go ahead and process these images. Image processing is very, very expensive. It's very CPU and memory intensive. And so when the system is falling offline, that can cause errors as well. So we alert for those infrastructure conditions. We're also looking to have, from a pipeline perspective, because this image processing goes across multiple services, everything from ingestion through the S3 bucket down through publishing to our customers on their devices, we need to be able to track that processing as it goes through all different microservices. So this is where we rely on distributed tracing from New Relic as inserts header information into each transaction. So the amount of information that we monitor is varied. It depends upon the service. The developers are educated to know what information we're looking for each of their specific services. My challenge is to ensure that we're providing the tools so that they are comfortable monitoring on their own, as well as collecting enough information, putting information in the appropriate places so that if there is an issue, they can triage quickly and appropriately. And we've had some great success in rolling out, say, distributed tracing for that very reason.
Cool. I'm in here reading some of our questions from the audience here. I've got another one for you, Scott, to talk about here a little bit, and then believe me, we'll get back to New Relic here. Let me just read it off here. Can Climate talk about how they approach naming the various applications and components to differentiate between product and QA environments, and how it's implemented, manual config within New Relic, automation, etc.? Interesting. Well, that's really getting right into it. So how do you actually differentiate things? Wow.
So the naming convention is by the service owner themselves, and we've had some interesting names. Like Game of Thrones was popular for a while, so we have some interesting service names. So we have an orchestration tool that we use to deploy services, and so we use a command line to deploy the application. We use command line parameters to differentiate the applications as well as the environment. So, what you might get is, say, Lannister QA1. And so we parse that literally, we parse the command line and then publish information from the command line up through our system, and we push it into the New Relic YAML file for that particular service itself. And so therefore, it's published to the right spot within New Relic to differentiate, whether it's production QA1, whether it's the different service names or whatnot. So that's one answer to one question. There is a few more. Why don't you roll those up to me real quick? There was a question about instrumentation and how we choose that, correct?
Yeah, let's see. Approach to naming, let's see, production versus QA, and manual config within New Relic, automation, etc. I think that was about.
So let's discuss manual configuration. So this is a recent issue. So we are moving towards away from the UI, if you will. We prefer to not have developers make instrumentation changes on the new Relic UI. We prefer to have those changes be more intentional, be more infrastructure as code, and happen in the service manifest. So what we're doing is to create a whole new area in our service manifest, and we're also enhancing our tool that interprets the service manifest to push the instrumentation to the central file. So we're going to effectively make everyone who's been an admin before in New Relic back down to maybe a power user. This is to ensure that developers don't make the clicky mistake, if you will, in the UI, and changing maybe something they shouldn't. By putting everything into a service manifest file that's checked into our GitLab, we're effectively putting controls in the system, so we have history. So we know when someone changed the AppDex from one device to the next, and they can actually talk to why they're making the change. So for example, if you had an AppDex 0.95 and now it's a 0.60, that's a huge change. Why would you do that? What's the JIRA ticket to say it's okay to go to such a low AppDex value for this particular service? So we're also pushing out standards across the organization to help developers think about what the monitoring should look like. So if you recall, I mentioned before that we rely on New Relic to be the thought leaders in the monitoring observability space. And so all that thought leadership is in documentation up on New Relic University. So I extract information as a SME for climate for New Relic to say, well, this is what we should worry about. Some of the key things we worry about are like AppDex, but it's also make sure we have standardized alert policies, standardized notification channels to really reduce the complexity for the developers so they can focus on their services and to go deep into particular areas. So for example, what we're going to have is that for these batch of services owned by this technology team, here is your alert policy ID. We put them into the service manifest file. That way the developer doesn't really have the chance to make an unintentional mistake. Here is a notification standard for your particular alert policy. Here's an ID that goes into your service manifest file. Therefore, you are less likely to make a mistake if it's standardized. For other things such as key transactions, we're developing standard for this. The key transactions is a great example of really changing from, say, the application or services view of the world to the new API economy, which is that we might be interested in, say, just the gets or the puts for a particular service. And so by introducing the concept of key transactions into our service manifest files, and maybe there's a different notification channel for that. Maybe there's a different AppDex key for that rolls up to the service. We're labeling developers to be more specific as to what they're looking for. They can be more proactive if there's a particular issue. But the point is we standardize on all these different metrics for the developers with information provided to us by New Relic so that they can focus on their job versus considering how to be experts in monitoring.
Got it. Awesome. So I've got one I'm going to take a stab at here, and then Eric, I've got one for you here coming as well. There's one here that said, in the beginning, you mentioned having the right people in DevOps who understand infrastructure as well as code. How can companies fill in the skill set gaps? You know, like a dev, they can't become a DevOps in a day or vice versa. And so let me just mention something, and I'll risk you being a little bit controversial here. You know, one of the things that's become famous about DevOps is this sort of idea that, you know, operations used to be a lot about infrastructure, and, you know, and DevOps became famous for turning infrastructure into code and making, you know, managing infrastructure being a part of the development process. Well, let me tell you what's happening. More and more, infrastructure, and with the cloud, infrastructure is becoming commoditized, and yes, it's becoming a part of the development process, and it's becoming less and less of something that organizations need to worry about, and it's something they're just going to get from their vendor. I would not, just as me personally, I would not invest a lot of money in organizations learning about exotic techniques for scaling infrastructure. You know, a million years ago when I was a developer, I learned how to program on one machine for one user. And nowadays, you have to learn all sorts of skills to learn how to scale programs with web servers and caches and all sorts of stuff in order for your applications to be able to run for large numbers of users. And this is a set of skills that don't have to do with your business. They have to do with scaling applications. And this set of skills has become commoditized, and your cloud vendor, and AWS is probably the very best at this, has figured out how to commoditize this sort of scaling of stuff. And you're seeing it with serverless, and you're seeing it with a lot of what we're doing within all our other service offerings. And I really wouldn't spend a lot of time. I mean, you get it with our consultants that are out there can help you scale your infrastructure. You can do it yourself, but I wouldn't spend a lot of money on that because it's becoming more and more programmatic and available to you. And so that's just not core knowledge that I would want to retain in my business. It's something you're just gonna get either provided to you by your vendor, or you're going to be able to buy pretty easily. And so I wouldn't invest in that as a core capability in your business. If you do things with AWS serverless, you'll get scalable infrastructure pretty much as part of the package, and you're going to be able to get it in a lot of other ways otherwise. And so your scalable infrastructure is going to be a part of it's going to be included in your application. And so I wouldn't worry about it too much with the other things that are in there as part of kind of the overall DevOps package. Once again, that's a little bit controversial. I think some of the people, especially in the Kubernetes world, are loving the idea of being able to be very exotic and be able to fine-tune their infrastructure. But I think even in that world, with things like Fargate, you're getting to the place where the infrastructure is going to be just something that's going to be provided automatically. So Eric, there's another one in here that's kind of interesting that I wanted to ask you. Here's this question. For organizations that are all in on AWS, what's the interplay between New Relic's offerings and some of AWS's monitoring, logging, and observability tools, such as CloudWatch Logs, and X-Ray? Are there specific use cases or points of scale where you choose one or the other, or are there use cases where they can be complementary services?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think the first thing to note is that they are complementary and designed to be complementary that way. Specifically, from a product standpoint, New Relic has an integration, so it's a platform-to-platform integration with AWS, where we ingest the data that is made available via the CloudWatch API, which allows you to just have the same pane of glass, so that you can plot your application data against your CloudWatch data in the same place, as well as organize and alerting conditions and workflow around that. So if you want to unify your alerting tools and you want all your alerts to come from New Relic, you can use New Relic to alert on the data that you're getting from CloudWatch, as well as if you have specific alert conditions where you need to, one of the features New Relic offers is our NRQL query language based alerts, which you may be able to alert on a query condition that compares stuff from CloudWatch to stuff from your internal application. Another key integration that we have is APM for Lambdas. So while the CloudWatch integration will give you, high-level summary metric data about your Lambda invocations, meaning how often you're doing them, how long they're taking, and the rates that they're completing, error rate, you can then get APM level data, so specific method and external tracing calls, and adding a Lambda to your distributed trace with the use of APM for Lambda. So I hope that answers the question. I think that's pretty good two use cases that we see very commonly with our customers.
Got it.
Hey,
Perfect.
can I jump in?
Sure.
Can I jump in that answer with quick the customer perspective?
Sure, please.
We have teams that use some of the AWS console for metrics as well as mostly New Relic. So I think the key difference for me and for some of the dev managers, if you're taking a look at hundreds of microservices, there's some key features that allow for managing those services to get the metrics out. So I think it's all about the pivots on the data. So if we talk about tagging and labeling, it gives you two different pivots. Tagging says, well, I'm a dev manager for these batch of services. I'm going to tag all these as being owned by my team. Therefore, I can easily lump all these together into a New Relic UI view. I can see how my services are doing. What you can do then from those services across multiple teams is create a label form, which is maybe like a feature set, and say, well, this service from this team is also part of this feature set from maybe a horizontal perspective within the stack that says that these services are linked together for multiple teams to provide an overall experience for customers. So for us, we've got a geospatial team, we have a platform team, a data science team, and they all come together when the feature set, maybe on the horizontal, which is called outcome-based pricing. So each of these teams has a service or a set of services that enable our outcome-based pricing feature set. So by using tagging, you can see across the organization how the services are doing. By using labels, you can see how all these services are behaving from a feature set perspective, which is interesting from a product manager perspective, even up through the executive team. And then when you throw entities into the mix, which allows you to bring maybe more parts of the store together, which is to say that I'm interested in this feature set, but I'm interested in who's calling into the feature set as well as who's taking the out of the feature set across the entire platform. Or I'm interested in all the RDS databases because I'm a data ops guy. So there's features within the New Relic tool set, which in my humble opinion, provide a great pivots across the stack to see who needs what and extract the information they're looking for, to make better decisions with regards to are we up or down? How many errors do we have at this point, and is that a problem? Do we have any open incidents right now within this particular feature set that need to be addressed? So there's a lot of great pivots within the visualizations for New Relic that I think help people manage their stacks.
Awesome. So last thing I wanted to mention is that there was some question about kind of how New Relic relates to kind of the SRE role. And just the thing that I wanted to say is that I kind of view Relic as an SRE's super toolkit. Whether you are an SRE or you're one of these dev team members that is doing SRE activities, I can't think of a better dashboard to do SRE types of tools or to do SRE types of activities than New Relic. Any comments from you guys on that? I think that New Relic's exactly what you need in order to do those activities.
Well, of course, I agree wholeheartedly with that, Kelly. Thank you. And the idea being that, and even to go back to what you had said originally about what you're doing, what you folks do at AWS about not even having an SRE role, we see that with customers a lot as well. And the reason for that is that as these teams meld together, and the responsibility of owning, that piece of really not just code, that functionality, that feature from end to end, gets micro focus on the team. A tool like New Relic really allows them to customize what they're seeing and focus specifically on that from top to bottom. Whereas in the past, the tools were designed to go lateral, vertical. Just the actual piece of technology that each practitioner was working with. By being able to go across services and down through the stack in the same tool, that really gives you the power to see that, like we said, observability, or get that view that you need to the things that matter to you most.
So we're showing a set of URLs there with some next steps, a little bit about AWS and DevOps, and about New Relic on AWS and New Relic in AWS Marketplace. We really appreciate everyone attending the webinar, and we give great thanks to Scott and Climate Corporation for sharing their story. Thanks everyone for attending, and we'll see you out there at some point in the future. Thanks very much for attending.